Chapter 2. The Warning. Mark woke up in the middle of the night. Something had stirred him, a faint sound, maybe footsteps in the hall. He sat up in bed, heart thudding. The room was cloaked in darkness, save for the faint glow of moonlight filtering through the curtain. He strained his ears, but all he heard was the creak of the old building settling into silence. He shook his head and lay back down. Just the wind, he muttered to himself. But his sleep didn't last. A second noise, louder this time, a soft knock at his door. Mark froze. The knock came again, deliberate and slow. "Who's there?" he called, his voice sharp against the quiet. No response. Gathering his courage, he slid out of bed, grabbed his phone for light, and crept toward the door. The knock didn't repeat, but he could feel something, an uneasiness hanging in the air. When he flung the door open, the hallway was empty. At his feet was an envelope. It was yellowed with age, the edges frayed, as if it had been handled many times. Mark picked it up, stepped back into the room, and locked the door. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded neatly. He opened it and saw two words written in jagged, hurried handwriting. "Turn back." The morning came slowly, and Mark welcomed the light with relief. He left his room, the warning tucked into his pocket, and made his way to the kitchen. Greta stood at the counter, stirring a pot of coffee. She glanced at him with her sharp eyes, but said nothing. Mark decided to break the silence. "Do you know anything about the old mine?" Her hand froze mid-stir. She placed the spoon down carefully and turned to face him. "Why do you ask?" "I saw something on a map in my room, a warning." He hesitated, then added, "And I found this." He pulled the note from his pocket and slid it across the counter. Greta stared at it for a long moment, her lips pressing into a thin line. Finally, she sighed. "That mine is trouble. Always has been." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "People who go there don't come back the same, if they come back at all." Mark frowned. "Why? What happened there?" Greta shook her head. "You'd be better off not knowing. Just enjoy the town. There's a bus leaving tomorrow. You should be on it." But Mark wasn't the type to walk away from a mystery. Something in her tone didn't just warn. It dared him. After breakfast, Mark set out to explore the town. The streets were just as quiet as the day before. He passed a few locals who greeted him with polite but distant nods. Every time he tried to strike up a conversation, he was met with short answers or awkward silence. In the center of the square, he noticed a small group gathered near the church. An older man, the one from the cafe, was speaking in hushed tones. When Mark approached, the group quickly dispersed. The man looked up, his expression tightening. "You again," he said flatly. Mark ignored the tone. "Why is everyone afraid to talk about the mine?" The man squinted at him, his lips curling into something between a smirk and a scowl. "Curiosity kills, you know." "That's not an answer." The man leaned closer, his breath heavy with coffee. "The mine's been closed for decades. Landslides, gas leaks, bad luck. Call it what you want. But the forest remembers." His eyes darkened. "And it doesn't forgive." Mark opened his mouth to press further, but the man waved him off, retreating back into the church. By afternoon, the envelope and the warnings were weighing on him. He returned to the hostel and pulled out the map. The red circle and its warning loomed large in his mind. "Do not go to the abandoned mine." He wasn't sure if it was stubbornness or sheer curiosity, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't leave without seeing it for himself.